Well, I was going to record something today, but that was completely different because apparently there's some interesting news going on. So, and it's not something I'm. This is weird, but anyway. So I was talking about this book, The Redneck Manifesto, last week by Jim Goad. So as it turns out, I go online tonight and I find out, oh, apparently Jim Goad died a month ago. Crazy. And, at first it was like, because of the person I saw posting it, it was like, I'm not sure how true it is, because Pilleater Joe Nally is a wonderful writer, but at the same time, he's also a little shit stirrer that he stirs shit for fun. So, this morning I wake up and here on Countercurrents by Greg Johnson is a 2,460 word ode to Jim Goad, which is a reference to something that Goad himself wrote called an Ode to Bucky Goad, which was about his brother who died in France, was murdered in France. So yeah, apparently Jim Goad died. Now, for the uninitiated, Jim Goad came primarily into the public eye through Answer Me. I have a signed anthology. That's that page. Yeah, I have a signed anthology of Answer Me. Which Answer Me is one of the most, I would say one of the more controversial published works ever. It's got interviews with everyone from Anton LaVey to David Duke to a guy that was raped dozens of times in prison to the point that he seemed to actually like it. There's an essay by Boyd Rice in there called Revolt Against Penis Envy, which, if you look at what those letters spell, R-A-P-E, it's rape. And that's actually the subject of the fourth and final issue in there, which was actually published by Shane Bugbee, though Goad. So the story, there's a story with that. This is not by Jim Goad. This is by Shane Bugbee. I have something in here which I will read. But anyway, so from the Countercurrents article by Greg Johnson, it says, James Thaddeus Goad was born on June 12, 1961 in Ridley Park, Pennsylvania. He died on June 22nd, 2026 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, of long-term health problems. He had just turned 65. And then it gives a brief biography and how apparently he hadn't been writing for about a year now, and that he died because his brain cancer had returned. Now, in terms of other publications that Goad did beyond Answer Me, there's of course the Redneck Manifesto, which I did mention. There's a true crime collection, which I used to have, but I gave away to get money. Then there's the Headache Factory. This is a bunch of tales of obsession from the person he went to prison over. I think is in here. I don't know. Then there's this, which is pretty funny, Jim Goad's Gigantic Book of Sex. But yeah, I saw it last night while I was taking a walk, because all of a sudden it popped up on Twitter with what Joe Nally said, which he describes as, this isn't a eulogy, Nally says. This isn't a tribute. This is a call-out. Because, I don't know. Joe Nally's a weird one. I like some of his stuff. I have one of his vinyl records, but I also gave his book away for money. So, But anyway, this is what I had to write about the Philadelphian in the book I Stole Ed Gein's Tombstone. So, Chapter 9, Robbing the Grave Robber. Netflix has continued its run of serial killer biopics this year with the tale of Ed Gein. Much can be said about and speculatively projected onto the human leatherworker, but that is neither here nor there. What is here, however, is the interesting matter of the grave robber having been grave robbed. His grave was already prone to vandalism and was a resting place for broken beer bottles and cigarette butts, a disruption in an otherwise somber setting. The irony is that the plot had previously been violated by the cadaver himself. As Shane Bugbee noted, quote, he had no respect. Some of the graves he robbed were right next to his, unquote. As a means to restore some semblance of the average cemetery melancholy, as well as taking history to where it would be valued, the stone was taken on tour for all to see. As a result, the stone made it farther than the small Wisconsin town. From the small Wisconsin town, the man whose name was inscribed on it. The finale of the 8-episode Netflix series shows something similar to a scene from the movie's Lords of Chaos, with figures burning churches. Hell, it was close enough, but in reality, the theft was carried out by Expo of the Extreme founder Shane Bugbee and his associates. Pictures were snapped, a gravestone was cut from its base, and a cemetery was restored to what it was before Gein was made an addition. Initially, the stone was an incredibly overweight passenger, taken all about for show, and even getting a feature on the Howard Stern show. All the while, underground culture was bubbling up. The advent of Columbine in 1999 acted as a catalyst, and a noticeable growth in disenfranchised white America fed into what would become the Angry White Male Tour. Gein fit in with the theme perfectly. It was a bill of artists with the focal point on the shocking actuality of American mundane extremes. Abuse, addiction, underlying mental illness, financial instability, all the land of opportunity has to offer as it manifests its beautiful destiny. The tour kicked off on May 25th, 2001, framed by the plan to host the Angry White Male Tour on the lawn of the Seattle courthouse and the possibility of a parole violation. Answer Me author Jim Goad got into a debacle with Bugbee. Much was said, all leading up to Goad proclaiming, quote, if I wasn't on parole, I'd knock your block off, unquote. He was then given every opportunity to do so, met with the click of a camera turning off and an air of bring it on, bitch. From there, as legend has it, the Philadelphian then fled the scene to a hotel and booked a flight to get the hell out of Washington. It is speculated with strong correlation and impeccable timing that he had his then girlfriend, Marissa, contact authorities regarding the missing headstone's whereabouts. At the time, Washington County Sheriff Patrick Fox received a tip from an unnamed woman about a rock promoter in Seattle. A blatant reference to Shane, who had also masterminded the Milwaukee Metal Fest and the ongoing Angry White Male spectacle. Somehow, no charges were ever filed over the thievery. The story given was that the stone was an exact replica, but it was an open white lie. The fact that they had it had even been part of the promotional propaganda. Now it sits unreturned. Gein is to this day without a real grave marker aside from bricks and bottles. And then, as local Plainfield urban legend now has it, his stone was actually buried at the grave to hide it after the Washoe County Historical Society failed to acquire the piece for an exhibition on the butcher. Local legend is all that is, however. Where it actually is, someone has yet to dig up, like Gein once did. For all intents and purposes, and given the statement by Sheriff Fox on the subject, one can suspect it would only be stolen ad infinitum if placed publicly. This means it's likely hidden in some storage unit, akin to the end of Indiana Jones. And that is Chapter 9 that I wrote for I Stole Ed Gein's Tombstone, which you can find on Amazon, or edgeinfanclub.com. So yeah, that details a bit of stuff regarding Goad about how he got the Ed Gein stone taken back by authorities, apparently, allegedly. But yeah, just an interesting day, just an interesting happenstance that I learned that, because I've been listening to a lot of, I was listening to a lot of material from him recently. I do have a whole archive of his stuff, at least online. Where is it? Here we go. Projects, Discord, Goad. Okay, yeah, I have, how many messages are in here? Over 60 things saved into this. Yeah, I know my shit. But yeah, just an interesting occurrence that I wake up and somehow what Pill Eater said was true. But yeah. Aside from that news, I guess, I wasn't planning on doing something talking about some guy that died a month ago. But hey, I can do whatever the fuck I want. And it is interesting. It is interesting. Like, I think Goad was a great writer. He could pretty much write whatever was put his mind to. But there's also, actually, I don't really give a fuck, as I said in the last thing I was talking about Goad with, that's a personal beef, and I really don't give a fuck to get involved in that shit at this point. It's not my beef. Which is funny, though, because that beef did get me blocked by Boyd Rice on Instagram. But that's fine. I can interview him eventually, if ever. I don't really care. Not like I don't have a pretty decent idea of what he thinks about things. He's pretty vocal about that, for the most part. Just so long as you don't reference certain letters between him and James Mason, who wrote a magazine that was collected into an anthology of the same name called Siege. But yeah, Goad has kicked the bucket. Very, very interesting, revelatory news, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I'm tempted to just go on talking about other things. And you know what? Why not? What else? Let me see. I've got a short story that I'm working on. I'm not sure if it's done yet. I think it is. It's turning kind of more into poetry than it is a story. I watched a movie on Efilism. It was a self-made documentary on the topic, and I did have some thoughts on it. So the movie was from 2016. It's about half an hour long, and so, to preface, Efilism is an extremely pessimistic and nihilistic posit that not only is human life a travesty, but all sentience is. It's similar to antinatalism. It stems from antinatalism, which is the posit that humans shouldn't reproduce and that we should go extinct because we're more harmful to ourselves than we are beneficial, which is an interesting concept to think about because if you take groups like the Voluntary Human Extinction Movement, or, and my personal favorite, Chris Corda and her Church of Euthanasia, which I find the Church of Euthanasia the most practical and realistic of any of these people positing such things. Give me a second, my dog's at the door. Alright, so, Chris Corda. Actually, it's funny, Chris Corda comes out of the same epoch of artists and stuff. The Church of Euthanasia is this neo-Dadaist art project, ultimately. Even though it is registered as an educational institution, so it's tax exempt under that, which I do find actually cool. It's not registered as, like, an actual religious organization. It's tax exempt as an educational institution, which I can't disagree with personally. I think it is very educational. I mean, their site is quite interesting. Now, I do have my own critique of antinatalism, even though I do agree with the Church of Euthanasia, which even flew a banner proclaiming human extinction while we still can at its neo-Dadaist protests. But it is also more realistic that, as a whole, their goal, while it is impractical, widespread, even on a solely human level. Their marketing to presents it as a choice individually, stating, save the planet, kill yourself as their mantra. But with that, it's, in my opinion, still sort of whining and running away from problems with lazily projected misanthropy based on personal issues. And, valid as experience may be, it's, this idea that suffering is more a human fact of life, merely and largely resulting from conditions and ideals we ourselves have masterminded. As they say, we are our own problem, but at the same time, it's also our solution. It's really what you make of it. And, this is where I find Efilism to be way more of a cop-out, because other animals do not give a flying fuck, okay? They observably adapt and overcome the shit that we make. And that's just a fact. They do. You can see it. You can see deer crossing highways, even though they might get hit by a car. You can see animals navigating around us. Like, it's not like this thing. Now, back to the movie. The 2016 short opens explaining explaining the notable futility of life, however, in very much projecting this pathos-pulling propaganda of cruelty. Other animals can feel pain and suffering. However, as far as known, the concept of cruelty is one that is explicitly human, and such is really just projecting, as I said. And then it goes on to state how the universe itself began with a crude process, and the beginning with the Big Bang, and is itself forcefully imposed. Now, and this is largely in regard to how eventually there was this unintelligent design evolved. However, my thing is if you're going to make the atheistic posit of unintelligent design and that things just happen, which I don't necessarily disagree with, I do tend to lean into atheism, even though I would say I'm an agnostic. Saying that it's imposed is self-contradictory. How is it imposed if there is no creator that made some intelligent design? Just think about that. Anyway, it goes on to say that the Big Bang itself and what it led to was just bad ingredients mixing badly. And how do we actually assert that as a fact? Like, it seems that the ingredients mix pretty well, considering, oh boy, here we are. Why not just sort of enjoy it as much as we can? It's not that worthwhile to think, oh my god, everything's terrible, everything fucking sucks. It's like, well, if you think that, it's gonna suck. I do, and it's like, sure, there's privilege that can be pointed at that being said, but it's also like, people also make the most of life. Like, if you don't, you're gonna fucking hate yourself. It's really all up to you. Talking about how life arises mechanically, then is apparently enslaved to sentience, which is apparently the beginning of all ill in the universe, according to this movie. And it asserts that this consciousness's capacity to suffer is the cosmic, where any sort of cosmic value comes from. So, is that not a personal assertion? How do we factually state that pain is where value originates from? And then it says competition propelled by pain and pleasure, which is true. That is largely what competition is, if you want to use human terms for it, sure. But as much, it's like, I think most animals have a tendency to want to procreate. The base tendencies for every species on this planet is feast, fight, fuck. Everything else extends from that, including with humans. Not the worst things in the world. And yeah, competition comes as a result of that. Competition isn't necessarily the worst thing ever, Like, competition got people on the fucking moon, mind you. Like, if it wasn't for the US and the Soviet Union having this libido contest of the Cold War and subsequent space race from that, no one would have gotten into space, mind you. Like, we could have. It just would have probably taken a lot longer. And it's like, well, what point did that do? And it's like, to prove that we fucking could, more than anything. Like, yeah, it was more idealized as some sort of military strategy because, oh my god, Sputniks could be over us, watching us on our every move. Oh boy, what do we have now but satellites that can zoom right in? Like, if I go outside, a satellite could zoom right in and see exactly what the fuck I'm doing. By our own government. And any other one that has something up there. However, again, is this idea that competition propelled by pain and pleasure is not, in this sense, negatively assumed with a subjective interjection. And it goes on to say that it's delusional. And what is delusion beyond a human construct? No animal's delusional. They have a biological prerogative of what they're doing. And where that comes from, we don't know yet fully, but, it's like, if you don't fuck, you don't reproduce. If you don't eat, you don't survive. If you don't fight in an animal setting, you die. You might die in fighting, but, at least with the other two, you continue. And, ultimately, this assertion of delusion, does that not sort of contradict the mechanical process mentioned before, too? Because it's like, if it's delusional, then it's just something that we made up completely on our own accord, like, it just, it's like, ultimately, I would say that, the film could just put an I feel in front of everything as the speaker was narrating, because it's essentially just tantamount to that. It really seems more like personally projected pain and pathos, and I'd say I feel bad, but I don't feel bad because people put themselves in these states, and it's like, I can't say I haven't before, but it's like, this is why I agree with the Church of Euthanasia. If it's so bad, save the planet, kill yourself, and I'm not saying to kill yourself, that's just a suggestion, from the Church of Euthanasia, because they have, as I said, the most realistic posit of this all. And how exactly is one going to enact any sort of removal of all sentient life without causing mass pain and suffering? You're not. There's really no way to. Sure, you could get rid of the atmosphere, maybe, but again, that would take a lot. You might have more pain and suffering added to everything in that, and it's like, how is this a realistic posit other than just projected self-loathing? I don't understand. Like, maybe one of these ethicists could tell me, but it's not. I highly doubt they will. Then I've been I'm gonna drink some coffee first. How could someone hate life with nicotine? But anyway, I've been going through a lot of John Kiriakou interviews and stuff lately. I find him to be very funny. I like the guy. Though I do have to question if Kiriakou is really controlled opposition, even if it's unbeknownst to him. And it's like, sure, he went to prison for 2 years, but, there's also the fact that there's a case where United States troops were captured by the Chinese Communist Party and came out in full support, which is called brainwashing, but maybe they did end up loving it. I'm not sure. It's ultimately an open-ended question whether they were brainwashed or they did eventually love it. But John Kiriakou was put in prison for 2 years, and was, in fact, largely away from the public eye prior to becoming a meme. And could that as well have been contrived with this sort of virality? Because it is interesting that he popped up while the idea of psyops were getting a ton of mainstream and memetic attention. Even now, you can go on Instagram Reels and see this with all these edits of like Jeffrey Epstein and P. Diddy, which are that also feature Charlie Kirk usually, or Kirkinator, the mechanical version, or this George Floyd parody too. It's fucking hilarious, don't get me wrong, but it's like this is obviously like, I don't know if it's like actual regular people prompting this. I wouldn't be surprised, but as much I wouldn't be surprised if what a lot of the comments saying, wow, the CIA and Mossad are working overtime on this one. But, that is just an assumption. It could, as much from that, as I said, just be people making memes about things, because, humor is really all we have at this point for any sort of power. I mean, mind you, the hantavirus was basically bullied out of the hantavirus was basically bullied out of existence. People were like, no, we're not doing this shit again. Keep those people on that fucking ship. And it's like, this is fucking hilarious to watch, but it's like, Jesus Christ, we don't want that again. And then I guess I do find it sort of similar to Julian Assange, who was basically internationally blackballed, while Kiriakou travels, teaches, and plays Angry Birds 2 at will. And, people have been killed for far less than exposing national secrets, less noteworthy than torture. Maybe it would make a stink if they killed him, but as much he has spent 19 years publicly talking about this stuff, 2 of which, as I said, were in prison. Though, I do like him, I do, because I find him oddly reminding of the astrophysicist Brian Cox in his articulation. But, then again, he also has detailed how CIA recruits, in part, are done based on sociopathic tendencies. So it remains open and to be seen answer of yes or no if he's controlled opposition or some sort of asset feeding people a confirmation bias. And all I can do is speculate until it's truly known, if ever. And it's interesting, yeah, as I said, it's interesting he popped up while the idea of psyops got a ton of mainstream attention recently, but yeah. I do find it interesting, though, that, according to Kiriakou, the things like the Grateful Dead and the hippie movement, coming out of San Francisco came from CIA meddling. I don't disbelieve it. And being that, as he alleges, I wonder how much of the 60s in San Francisco counterculture, as a whole, could have been contrived with or manipulated into interaction by these federal intelligence apparatuses. Like what if, say, the Yippies or Black Panther parties, or even the Weather Underground, as even Nancy Kirshen notes in her book, Levitating the Pentagon, which came out last year, and I met her at a thing, which I also met Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn, who was on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list for about a decade. Anyway, as Kirshen notes in her own book, though mainly in specific examples rather than broadly speculating, that it was revealed in trials that many informants existed to both infiltrate and cause rackets to defrock these things. And it's kind of like how, I forget if it was, I think it was Nixon, who wanted to use someone like Charles Manson to essentially destroy the counterculture. I can't say he didn't, but I can't say he did, because I don't really know. But at the same time, maybe he did, but, then after that was the aesthetic terrorists, which was, as I mentioned, was was people like Chris Corda, Boyd Rice, Jim Goad, Shane Bugbee, Marilyn Manson, three generations of LaVeys. Like there's the George Patras book, Art That Kills, which details all this very well. Though that is a hard book to find. I haven't even read it, actually. Next time I get $300, though, I think I might buy it, just for the fuck of it. And, okay, what else is news? The new version of Front Toward Enemy by Marilyn Manson has been released as the second single for One Assassination Under God, Chapter 2. Now, it was originally put out as the B-side to the Raise the Red Flag single exclusively. And there is a difference between the two, though it is rather minimal. And in general, ever since then, I've seen comparisons to other tracks like Little Horn off Antichrist Superstar all around. And to that, I would succinctly agree in every way. How it differs from the original B-side release is similar to how Antichrist Superstar compares to its original demo. The same as Portrait of an American Family does, pre-Trent Reznor mixing, where the original Family album and original Antichrist Superstar demo sounds like essentially just a distorted variety of demons chanting the lyrics on top of even more distorted instrumentals. Like how Front Toward Enemy is presented with its original hearing lined up with the more polished one for the new album. However, it still vaguely keeps it with, like, the get up and fight, and then obviously it with vocals that are continuation from what are heard on Exit Wound and the prior album, One Assassination Under God, Chapter 1. So yeah, that is very interesting. But yeah, I'm just going through all sorts of news today. Why not? I could be a news anchor for myself. I did do that thing called Claudia's New News the other day, like last year or something. I called it that because I could make the abbreviation for that CNN, and I thought that was funny as hell. Maybe it was like VNN. Maybe it's like VNN, VOT News Network. But no, Anyway, I have an article on Skylar White out. I have an article on, I have another story and continuation from the Stills of Slaughter that I put out. And, yeah, just as a recap, Jim Goad died. I watched a movie on Efilism, and I reviewed that here. Newish Manson song, and yeah, Auf Wiedersehen.